Wilks. I serve as a technical specialist covering our East team here with Verdesian Life Sciences. Been on board for almost 2 years now. We get the great opportunity to service and work with our account managers and sales staff and build relationships with our awesome retail partners like Mr. Ben here. So good afternoon, sir. And, to start things off, I'd love to just kind of get your background a little bit of where you're located, how long you've been in the industry, and just kind of give us some just high level details about your operation.
Sure. Hello, Wilks. So, Ben Hushon, I'm an ag partner in a family-owned ag retail business called The Mill. We operate in southeastern part of Pennsylvania and the northern part of Maryland, kind of on both sides of the line. Born and raised on a dairy farm, so been around agriculture my whole life, and we started the mill, at least the agronomy side of the mill. I guess it's been 24 years ago now.
That's incredible. So what would of all the lessons learned and everything you've been able to pick up over that 24-year career, what is in your mind maybe some of the best advice you could potentially give someone that is, coming into their career or just starting out?
Yeah, it's funny. I've been asked that. I guess it's the gray hair, but I get asked that question a little bit more the older I get. And I think pretty clearly I've settled on two things. One, absolutely never stop learning. And the second one, and I actually learned this through agriculture, and I'm even more convinced of it today, is keep a couple different sources of information. For a while, I would just attend extension meetings or nothing wrong with extension, value them, still attend them today, but started adding in some other sources of info. And of course, today, that's endless. When I was first getting started as a certified crop advisor in the late 90s, it was pretty much you had to read it by the book or something like that. But as time's moved on, so those would be my two. One, never stop learning, and two, have multiple sources of information.
Oh, that's great. I love that. So with today being World Soil Day, and that's really centered around and celebrating and building kind of awareness and talking about soil health, just not only here in America, but also obviously worldwide. So, over the past few years, that's been a term or a phrase that's really gained a lot of traction. So would you mind just kind of elaborating on what soil health means for you, maybe personally as well as professionally, if there's a way to, or if there's a difference between the two?
That's interesting because, again, that word is relatively new. Quantifying soil health is just trying to do things that make sense, and again, having started when in the dairy world and then being around a lot of livestock folks, does it make more sense to have that a healthy animal or a healthy human is going to survive the next sickness that they're introduced to? Well, why wouldn't that same logic apply to our soil? And that's how my simple mind has kind of gotten it. Like, if we want a healthier, if we believe adding probiotics or to an animal's gut or adding vitamins to a human diet, the right ones in the right balance, help us fend off disease, help the animal, the young calves, get started stronger. Why in the world wouldn't that same thing happen with soil? So that's the way I look at it, is a healthy person, a healthy animal makes sense. We've seen that result. Why wouldn't a healthy soil also make a better soil to produce what we're trying to grow?
And I think that's a great answer. That's a great analogy. I really like that. But kind of speaking to that a little bit more. So when you think of, a lot of the farmers that you've been working with for an extended period of time, or even like your own family farm, like you were mentioning before we started recording, is there like specific signs that you've seen or potentially look for that kind of indicate, this is a healthy, good soil, or we're heading in the right direction. What kind of signs do you typically look at to show that soil health is kind of trending in that direction?
It's funny, when I was a kid, there was a crop advisor that used to call on my father. So we're talking in the 70s. And I can remember him. This is when our family farm and most people were still plowing, chisel plowing, moldboard plowing. And he would talk about cover crops, and he would talk about earthworms. And I can just remember as a little kid him taking dad and any of my brothers that would go along and dig up a shovel and say, look at this, you want. And I think he had a quantity of earthworms you wanted. I don't remember what those were, but I fast forward to where in our part of the world, because of the Chesapeake Bay, I believe, there's a no-till, or at least minimum till, has become the norm. There's certainly always exceptions for various reasons, but it's kind of the norm now. And when I think of a healthy soil, when I walk on to a field and it's February, March, and I'm not sure if they grew corn last year or soybeans, that's a sign. And that just kind of came upon us here in the last 10 years, in our organization. Is some folks will tell us, well, I had 250 bushel corn or 210 bushel corn. I have to turbo till those stalks in, etc. And we got to look, and we go on certain farms, and it's crazy. No turbo tillage, no stalk breakdown products applied, and the stalks are gone by planting time. To me, that would certainly be that's the one that we've noticed the most. And it was kind of an aha moment that we had about 5 years ago, kind of as a group.
Yeah, I can't agree more with both of those. Of like just a healthy biome for diversity with earthworms, things of that nature, as well as obviously the soil microbes being able to just cycle through those nutrients in a fast way. Like that's a great point. Obviously soil is something we depend on in agriculture to the utmost. I mean, that's where everything comes from that we're doing with planting these crops and harvesting at the end of the year. Everything comes from that. So with that being such a just a powerful resource and such something that we have to focus on, what are some of the challenges that you've seen in y'all's soils over the past few years? Maybe kind of speak to your area there in the Delmarva, or specific things that have arisen.
Oh, there's certainly the weather. Seems like we go, maybe it happens every year, maybe it's always happened, but we go, seems like long periods without rain. And there is something to it that the healthier that soil is, the more likely that the water that you do get, that inch that may come in 30 minutes, is going to get in the ground. And I'll tell you a perfect example this summer, and I actually captured it on video. Was coming home. We were getting hammered with rain. It was June, and drove by a farmer's field who is no-till and cover crop, and just happened to notice, oh, but boy, they've had a lot of rain here, because I can see a little bit of muddy water coming out of the field. And he also does some turbo tillage, but nothing crazy. And then as I drove in further past my cousin's farm and then our farm, which is zero till, or my father's farm, and the water was clean. And I got out in the rain and videoed it. It was unbelievable, coming off the side of a 30-acre field, all funneling down into a channel, and it was clean. So I, again, got back in my pickup, went back out to the neighbor, and it was crazy how muddy it was. And there's a fella who isn't doing everything wrong. It's just it, and in fact, maybe even doing anything wrong. Again, turbo till has its place for folks that want to, but all of that, and just to think about the amount of water that was going in the ground, but even what was running off was coming off clean. But we know this summer we had a long period of dry weather, and my brother Bill and I'd be in the field and go, there's still moisture out here. And of course, this is when corn's up and growing well, June, July. And we both had been in fields that were all dried up. We were already seeing drought stress in the community. There's certainly, again, hard to quantify. We're trying. We're sending soil samples away to 2 different labs, getting um, words that I've never seen before on pieces of paper and charts showing us what they are. So we're trying to quantify soil health, like I think much of the country is. But for us, it's just these kind of touch, feel things you see. And again, corn curling in the summer, in the heat, in the middle of the day, or even in a long drought is probably the one that we notice the most, Wilks.
Yeah, that's great. Great point. So kind of to that end, like you were saying, this concept of soil health doesn't necessarily happen in one season, right? It's something we kind of build on. So in your mind and what you've seen, how do you balance kind of some immediate needs that a grower may have from a profitability standpoint to be able to push yield and kind of be able to stay positive in that end, with that long-term investment for soil health that can kind of sometimes butt up against each other a little bit?
Absolutely. We got to remember 10 years ago, the word sustainability came racing into agriculture, and it wasn't long till we were like, yeah, don't forget the farmer has to be sustainable first so that he can afford to be in business next year as he learns different and new ways to move forward. So I do know it is a challenge, so stepping into the crop advisor side depends on whether a farmer owns the ground or is renting the ground. And then, like everywhere in the country, there's farms that they know they have for the long term, most likely, and then there's farms they know that are going to get bid out every 2, 3, 4 years, depending on what the contract is. So that's why it seems like it's a multi-pronged approach. Folks are certainly, what's a farmer get paid on? He gets paid on bushels at this point in time. Hopefully someday quality and protein levels are going to be a little bit more common, because I think that's when we're really going to move the needle in the soil health space. But when I think about if a farmer owns the ground, doesn't mean he wants to take better care of it, but he can afford that long-term investment. And I think a lot of times, Wilks, the challenge is from the outside, people go, oh, the farmer just doesn't care about the rented ground. No, it's whether he can afford that long-term investment. And what we're finding more and more is farmers are coming to us as certified crop advisors saying, okay, this is rented ground. What can I do? And in some cases, they'll go to cover crop. In some cases, they'll come get into some of the humic and fulvic acids, some of the sugars, various things to try to rev up that engine. And again, it all depends on the landowner and the investment in it. So everybody is asking for something in this space. It's just whether they're looking at a 10-year investment or whether they need to get the ROI out this year.
Yeah, great point. Great point. So kind of to that, from your viewpoint, how do you foresee, or what kind of role does innovation in this space play? Specifically, biologicals being such a large umbrella that we are delving off into over the past few years, as well as like nutrient use efficiency products, things of that nature. How does that play into this soil health? Especially in the years to come.
So I didn't think about this originally, but we're starting to see some data in this space. We're starting to see some things in fields, talking to folks that and again, we're a fertilizer dealer, so we have bins full of fertilizer. So I don't, but we are seeing where sometimes more is less, and trying to get that balance is the goal that we've been working on the last 15 years. Probably when we first started using the original Nutrisphere, um, and the original Veil, but the goal was again thinking about what's best for the farmer. And we're family owned business. My partner in the business, his family. I mean, he grew up farming, still is. So we're all very tuned in to the farmer sustainability, the guy who we're actually selling the product to. So we have we have noticed while trying to make the financial decisions and helping coach them through, if you use a stabilizer, there's a good chance you can use less fertilizer. Now, I know some people don't want to get down that road. We are very comfortable going down that road. We have a lot of data that helps us to know when we can and when we can't. As a side note, Wilks, we're starting to see that when we do reduce nitrogen and have a long-term history of good soil health practices, we're able to get that NUE even lower. We were excited when we got down below 1 pound per nitrogen per bushel of corn. Now we're a little disappointed if we're not at 0.8. And every year there'll be farms that are consistently under that. And when we look at them in a grand picture, most of them, their soil health practices would be an A, where some of the folks that were still struggling at that 0.9, their soil health practices are probably closer to a C, thinking about school grades.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So maybe to expand on that a little bit more, we'll delve off into it some more here in a second. But on piece of that, um, this soil health, the biologicals, the nutrient use efficiency products, these different practices, like it can kind of be daunting for someone that hasn't been able to learn with them much. So, maybe in your opinion, for a grower wanting to start down this path, what would be maybe one of the first steps that you would recommend? And if it's maybe different between owned ground versus rented ground, maybe delineate those two, or if it's the kind of same for both, I'd love to know what that would be in your opinion.
So that's a broad question, but I would narrow it down because we do get this question. Okay, here I am. I've sat through your meeting or one of your field days. Where can I start? And we generally start them thinking about corn first. We start by saying split your nitrogen and get a stabilizer on both applications. We don't go down the road too far about reducing nitrogen necessarily. We just ask people to start there. And then we also spend some time talking about the differences of the nitrogen stabilizers, because there are differences. I can remember sitting in a Winfield United meeting 15 years ago, and a scientist get up and explained at that time, the three main choices were on the market. And it was quite an aha moment because they offered all three, and they're just saying, we just want you to know how they work. So without naming other names, I'll tell you that's how we've landed 100% with Verdesian, because of what it doesn't do in the soil is sometimes as important as what it does do. But that's where we would start. We would start with getting a nitrogen stabilizer on and splitting that application. And then in the soybean space, same thing with the phosphorus. We don't split the application, but we do highly encourage people start stabilizing that phosphorus. Again, go back to one of the first answers I gave, the couple different sources of information. Back when we started using nitrogen stabilizer, extension in both states were saying absolute waste of money. And if we had only attended extension meetings, we certainly wouldn't have began down this journey of learning not just which one wins, it's about how to use it more than necessarily which one wins.
Fantastic. And, kind of to that degree, you've been with Verdesian and worked with our products for quite some time. So could you maybe speak to which ones specifically have had
Yeah.
a large impact on your operation, maybe for you there at the mill, as well as, obviously from an ROI standpoint for your growers?
Yeah. So everybody wants to talk about nitrogen, but the one that I think we have the biggest impact on a farmer's ROI is phosphorus. Over the years now, as time moves on, because we started working with Avail in 2007 or 8, the original Avail, and then of course migrated to the Avail T5. And since then, what's happened in our neighborhood is a lot more chicken houses are coming in. So there's a lot more and manure coming down, especially out of Pennsylvania, but off the eastern shore of Maryland too. But it seems like flows a little more down out of Pennsylvania. So that's caused caused us to sell a lot less phosphorus. So we're able to protect a lot less of it than we did. That has certainly evolved, but and then now we've moved into the free up, and it's pretty neat. Wilks, the first time we put free up, it didn't even have a name. We put it out in a replicated trial. We had a field day, and every group of farmers that came through, we sent 2 of them out and said, bring back 6 soybean plants every time, 5 times that day. These folks walked out, picked up plants, brought them in. All 5 times there was a clear difference. When we got to harvest in the corn plot, I don't remember the bean result, but in the corn plot, we had picked up 10 bushel and we used less phosphorus. We used MAP in our organization. So we had applied 20% less and actually had a better yield out of it. So we quickly switched as soon as it became legal, and you folks, Verdesian, got a name on it. We switched to the free up and have been very happy with it because it's also releasing tied up phosphorus. It's not just protecting what we're putting down, but it's releasing some tied up phosphorus. And then certainly on the nitrogen, we've been on the trail, pretty much have stayed with N-Charge or Nutrisphere. We treat all of our urea with the N-Charge G, and there certainly are farmers or crop consultants that don't want us to reduce the amount of nitrogen, but we tell folks that when we're using that product, we're confident in a 0.8 NUE with it, which again, I tell them, if you can't believe the fertilizer guy that you can use less urea or less nitrogen, I don't know who in the world you're ever going to believe, because we make money selling. Do we make some money selling Verdesian products? Absolutely. But would we rather sell another, financially? Does it make more sense for us, purely financial, to sell more fertilizer? Absolutely. But many years ago, my partner and I were sitting at a meeting in Iowa. I think that's about when the Iowa Waterworks was starting their lawsuit. And we're like, you know what? We need to go back home and be part of the difference, because I'm convinced farmers are the solution to these environmental problems we have. For a while, I think they were getting all the blame. And I think now many of the environmental groups realize the farmers are who's going to fix the issue that we have. Or at least many of them. So anyhow, that was a long answer.
No, that was great. You helped tie a lot of different things together, so that was perfect. And this isn't really a question. This is just kind of a side note that I hope our team can capture here well. With Verdesian, that's with the use of our products, we don't always promote or condone like being able to cut rates or
Right.
use this product to reduce rates. But we have retailers, and we've shown it and various other third-party research trials that that is something that can happen. And exactly like you said, like that is something that you yourself profit from being able to sell fertilizer. So on the flip side of that, being able to tie these technologies and these products, and essentially you yourself recommend making less money for your operation. Like that just
Yeah.
shows a your your willingness to go and do what it takes for your growers to be successful, as well as highlight these products are benefiting the soil in a very real way. Um, so I guess to that, talking about these different products, we've had several at Verdesian that we've rolled out over the past few years, and I know some other companies that you work with are the same. So when it comes to new products or things that are being brought to you, how do you kind of determine
Hmm.
what's a good fit for you? How do you go through, like, okay, this is something I want to bring on board and bring to our growers? What's kind of that process on your side of bringing something into your nutrient management plan long term?
So that's a really good question because there's more and more products coming out now with an awful lot of claims. So we look at it a couple different ways. We never stop trialing products. Um, Sometimes it's as simple as somebody gives us a case of their magic juice and we get it out on a farm that we know is doing yield data or has yield monitors, and we have access to it through our technology side of our business, and we help them set up some trials. Um, but what we start with first is who our trusted vendors are. I read this all the time. Farmers look to their trusted advisor ahead of or more favorably than they do a lot of other folks in the ag industry. Well, we're the same way. But so we start with a trusted vendor. That's the one we're going to put in our personal replicated trials. We also have a retired University of Maryland used to run one of their research farms, Ron Mulford. We take products over to him, and I can assure you, we are matching up competitive products. We're not just drinking the Verdesian Kool-Aid. We are constantly trying other products and even other ideas. We have people come to us once in a while and say, "Well, you don't need all that stuff. If you just use our 15% humic acid, you'll do everything they say they're doing and more." And we put those out to the test also.
Wonderful. And this is something I love for you to expand on. Just kind of how those platforms and that system that y'all have kind of built and put in place, and like the crop showcase that y'all do, how that kind of ties into soil health overall, and how because to me it really binds into these technologies and being able to also assess how they best fit for y'all.
So I think it was 2010 or 11, we realized that more and more folks had yield monitors. And, I said we started the business, or at least the agronomy side of our business, 24 years ago, but I had been a crop advisor for a national for 15 years prior to that. So had been around, you know, try this. The farmer would say, sure. You get back to them at harvest and they say, I don't even remember where I put that. So we have certainly 10 years ago, if not 12, we started to be very specific on the on-farm trials. Then it was 15 years ago. We had a neighboring farm that essentially has given us 60 acres to do whatever we want with it. They have a few caveats. They want it to always look nice. So we almost don't need to scout it because the owner will call and say, hey, that field's getting a little weedy, because they don't let the weeds get up on their farm. And so in those farms, we focus on fertility. Uh, you know, we let the other folks do the weed control trials, etc. Now this year, because tar spot has become such an issue for us the last few years. We have done some replicated trials with fungicide, but the core of the whole event, the core of the whole learning each year is nutrients. And that's where we've learned to be really bold, because I don't want to go to one of our farmers with this nutcase idea that maybe they can get away with half their nitrogen when nitrogen's really high. Right now it's not really high. Phosphorus is insane, but nitrogen is reasonable. And just try different things, generally things that we think a farmer would consider doing, and then we match that up on our what we call the crop showcase. We match that up in the same field with what we would call the farmer standard practice. So we almost never do any zero fertility, because I'm not sure what we'd learn. There's not many farmers that are going to do zero fertility. So, and then we kind of combine it all together and we try to gather the farm data, the small trial data, and then our 60-acre farm, and try to continue to learn. And then what we see win on the 60-acre farm, the crop showcase, then we'll try to take that back out to try to find 8, 6, 8, 10 farmers that are willing to try some of that the following year.
It's great. So, like we've been talking about Verdesian, and how do you foresee this kind of playing out, Verdesian itself, being able to impact the next generation, as well as, what that means, being able to work together with you and other retailers?
That's very interesting questions. When someone starts beating on you, like, are you the guys that poison the ground, etc., I said, it is so much fun to say, well, I'm not sure we're ever going to quite agree on that, but can I tell you what farmers are doing in your area right now? When I look at what Verdesian is doing, they all have such great stories to tell in the community. And oh, by the way, they work. What's funny, Wilks, I thought of the last 2 times you folks have released a product. The most recent one that I remember being free up, within 12 months, somebody was knocking on my door with this product with a really cool name, telling me, look, and it happened to have almost all the same attributes as you folks. So Verdesian truly is a leader in this space. People are really copying or trying to copy what you're doing, which I guess is quite a compliment. It just challenges Verdesian to continue to strive to only bring out winners and continue to try to find that next need. And again, we now all have our ear turned to the soul health side, even though I'll be honest, I didn't start with my ear turned to that at all, but clearly there is a direct correlation between the two.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do they say? Mimicry is the most sincere form of flattery, something like that. But yeah, it doesn't take away the headaches at times. But
Nope.
this is all wonderful. And so I think the last thing I want to ask you, we've been able to cover a lot, and really appreciate all your insight. But if you could, I know this gonna be a hard task, but if you could, kind of boil everything down to where if you're sitting down with a, farmers, professional, or even like you just said, I loved, carrying it back to just, your neighbor that doesn't farm or isn't, so many of the population, especially now, is just so disconnected from ag. So even when you're having a conversation with them, if you could boil it down, what message would you say if you could just have, just one basically of why protecting soil health matters? What kind of would that highlight be for you?
I'd probably start by trying to get a read whether they're 100% driven by numbers or whether they are invested in their community. And most of the time, when I think about farmers, they're invested in the community. They want to be perceived as being good people, and they are. And don't you want to be a difference maker on your ground? And every farmer I've ever met, even if they don't have children of their own that they think are going to farm it, they want to leave it better. And that's to probably boil it down and start over again. I would probably start with, don't you want to leave it better than you found it? And of course, they're all thinking about they want better machinery and a bigger grain bin and things. And I like to talk to them at that point about how about the soil? I mean, we've learned so much over the last 25 years. It's honestly been like a whole new revolution. And why wouldn't it be? I tell them all the time the fertilizers were invented in the 40s and the 50s. Why would it be strange that we have found a better way to manage them, products to add to them, different versions of those products? So that my boil down would probably just encourage them to be part of the solution and to be leaders. And in our community, I remind anybody that I know is renting ground. I go back to the story I was telling you about. If you want to go win a landlord over, you go tell them that all your nitrogen is stabilized. And we've done this for a few farmers that have asked. We'll hit some bullet points of what Nutrisphere or Trident or Free Up are going to do for them. And and we don't necessarily preach about reduction. We talk about how it keeps it from getting into the water source. And it good chance the competitor is not going to come on that in that same driveway and talk about that. So again, that's how I boil it down. We tell people, why don't you try to be the difference and brag about what you're doing. So many of these farmers, they think the landowner doesn't care. They absolutely care.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. You said, because I can't agree more. I think definitely over the past few decades, definitely here of late, it seems like we're in the middle of a kind of like a revolution, a soul revolution of just everything we've been able to learn and see and do. And I really appreciate you being at the front line on that and all the work you've done. And appreciate your time today. That was fantastic being able to sit and chat with you. And if there's any other last minute comments or closing thoughts, I'd love to hear. But I really appreciate your insight.
No, I'd just say to farmers or ag retailers, find a partner on this journey. I would recommend Verdesian to be that partner, but find somebody and keep learning. Start with them somewhere. Don't start with all 6 products that they offer, because that's what happens. They show you the whole catalog. Just say, just like you asked me earlier, where should I start? And ask them where they should start. That would be my advice.
Love it. I appreciate it.